So, this was the Fallout show from AEW All Out, and we kicked off Dynamite with Malachi Black facing off against Dustin Rhodes. And I gotta say, I think Malachi Black has been booked perfectly so far. I think NXT did a pretty good job with him by making him seemingly unstoppable during his first few months in the business, and I think AEW is doing well at that too. And I guess this is continuing the story of Malachi Black targeting the Nightmare family. So after taking out Arn Anderson, Brock Anderson, and Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes was naturally next in line. See what I did there? And Black worked on Dustin's leg the whole time, and there was one point where it looked like Dustin might actually beat Malachi after he hit him with the Canadian Destroyer, but in the end, Dustin Rhodes accidentally made contact with an exposed turnbuckle, and Malachi Black took advantage and hit him with, to be honest, a really shitty looking spinning heel kick and pinned him for the win. So I'm interested to see if there's going to be anybody else from the Nightmare family that Malachi Black has to go through. And I'm honestly wondering who's a big enough name that they can actually beat Malachi Black and stop his hot streak. And then after beating Darby Allin at All Out in his in-ring return to professional wrestling, CM Punk came out to see who would be his next opponent. And then Taz grabbed a microphone from the announcer's booth and told CM Punk never to mention any of the members of Team Taz's names. And what I really liked is that they actually referenced their long history going back to ECW. But despite Taz's warning, Punk asked Taz to send Starks or send Hook or send Hobbs or any of the members of Team Taz to fight him. And as Punk made his way back up the ramp, him and Will Hobbs had a stare down. So I imagine Punk's next match is going to be Will Hobbs, which is pretty interesting to me because Will Hobbs is such a monster and such a big, powerful guy that I'm curious to see how Punk is going to deal with it. And then Hobbs went to the ring for his match, but before that, Ruby Soho was backstage and she was being interviewed by Tony Schiavone, who was interrupted by Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, and Rebel. And Ruby Soho, being the new #1 contender to the AEW Women's World title, brought up Britt's history with her, saying that she helped Britt break into the business, but Britt Baker told Ruby to go back to catering where she spent the last 4 years of her career, and well, I mean, she's not really wrong about that. And then we had Will Hobbs' match against Dante Martin, and after Dante Martin's star-making performance a few weeks ago, I really wanted to see him shine against Hobbs, and Dante got a little bit of offense in, which was really exciting to see, and I think the crowd is really behind Dante, and when you have a guy that can excite and can connect with the crowd like he can, I honestly think the sky's the limit for him. See what I did? Okay, forget it. But in the end, in Dante's flurry, Hobbs caught him with this massive spinebuster and pinned him for the win. And then American Top Team's Dan Lambert was up in a skybox with Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page. And I honestly think Dan Lambert is just such a good heel. He just gives off grumpy old man vibes, which makes him, in my opinion, utterly detestable. But basically all he did was hype up Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page and challenged anybody to step up to them. And then there was a backstage segment where Matt Hardy threatened to cut off Orange Cassidy's hair like they were trying to do at All Out, which Orange Cassidy, very unsurprisingly, was not really fazed by. And then we had a killer MJF segment, which thankfully transitioned him out of his rivalry with Chris Jericho, and he basically made excuses for his loss at All Out and started insulting the town they were in and everything in it and everybody in it. You know, just your typical heel work. But what was really good was when he started picking out specific members of the crowd, like Linda Pillman and Brian Pillman's daughter, who were sitting in the front row. And when he started insulting them, Brian Pillman Jr. came out and started defending his hometown and his family. And then MJF delivered a great line by calling Brian Pillman Jr.'s mother Melanie Metheny, which caused Brian Pillman to come into the ring, and Wardlow, doing his job as MJF's enforcer, stepped in front of him. But MJF, remembering how Wardlow didn't really help at All Out against Chris Jericho, told Wardlow to stand in the corner and look pretty. And then MJF went up to Brian Pillman Jr.'s face and told him that his mother should have aborted him. And that's when Brian Pillman Jr. snapped and started attacking MJF. And you could see Wardlow in the corner conflicted as to whether or not he should help MJF after MJF insulted him. But eventually Wardlow conceded to his duties as MJF's enforcer by pulling Brian Pillman Jr. off of him and giving him a German suplex. And then the other half of the Varsity Blondes and Brian Pillman Jr.'s partner, Griff Garrison, came out to help him, but Griff Garrison ended up getting hit with MJF's Dynamite Diamond ring, and MJF was going to hit him with his diamond ring again, but Brian Pillman Jr. came to his rescue, and then MJF and Wardlow left. And I honestly loved this segment just because of how good MJF is at getting heat. And Brian Pillman Jr. just made a really good babyface, being the hometown hero and defending his city and all the people in it, including his family. But what was really interesting to me was the moment with MJF and Wardlow, because for the past year, I think since MJF lost his AEW World Championship match at last year's All Out against Jon Moxley, they've been building up to Wardlow eventually turning on MJF. And I saw somebody online make this really good comparison where MJF is like Triple H and Wardlow is like Batista back in 2005 when Batista won the Royal Rumble. And once Batista broke out under Triple H's wing, Batista went on to become World Heavyweight Champion and arguably the most dominant World Heavyweight Champion. And I really think they're doing something similar here with Wardlow, where the muscle is just going to get tired of the guy he's working for, and he's going to eventually break out on his own and just become a huge star, which I think Wardlow really does have the capabilities of being. So I'm excited for when that eventually happens. And then Ruby Soho made her AEW Dynamite debut against Jamie Hayter, and to be honest, this match was kind of sloppy. There was a moment where Hayter had Soho up in the electric chair, and I don't think Hayter was able to hold her up, and she ended up just dropping Soho awkwardly. And it even got to the point where after the match was over, Ruby Soho was holding her neck, and I was starting to get really nervous. And apparently this isn't the first time either that Jamie Hayter has been a bit botchy, so I'm hoping that Jamie Hayter can improve her in-ring work, because the last thing we need is to see another Nia Jax. But to end the match, Ruby Soho kicked Jamie Hayter in the jaw and pinned her for the win. And after the match, Britt, Hayter, and Rebel attacked Ruby Soho, and Riho came out to try to make the save, but she was taken out as well. And then Chris Statlander came out with a chair and forced Baker and company into retreat. And then we had a trios match with the Pinnacles, FTR, and Shawn Spears against the Dark Order. And this pretty much continued the story of the dissension within the Dark Order. And sure enough, that's how this match ended, when the Dark Order miscommunicated and the Pinnacle capitalized on it to get the win. And then afterwards, they got into a shoving match before Anna Jay and Ty Conti came out to look on disapprovingly. And then backstage, Tully Blanchard said he wanted Shawn Spears to face Darby Allin next week. And Tully also added that he might end up going one-on-one with Sting soon enough, which I think would be pretty interesting to see Tully Blanchard and Sting come out of their semi-retirements and do what is probably one of their last matches ever with each other. And then Alex Marvez interviewed the Varsity Blondes backstage after the incident with MJF and Wardlow. And Brian Pillman Jr. said that he would be facing MJF on Dynamite at the Arthur Ashe Stadium. And then they were interrupted by The Acclaimed, and Max Caster of The Acclaimed said that he had a match with Brian Pillman Jr. this Friday on Rampage. And then Tony Schiavone interviewed The Elite and their new team member Adam Cole, baby. And I really like how they did the entrances with The Elite coming out together and then giving Adam Cole his own entrance. And Adam Cole came out, and I like this little touch where he went up to Tony Schiavone and warned him that even though he was really close with his girlfriend Britt Baker, if Tony even looked at her the wrong way, Cole would slap his face and knock his glasses off, which I thought was a really nice touch, because we've been seeing for a long time now how good of friends Tony Schiavone and Britt Baker are, and I was curious to see if Adam Cole came to AEW, how he would react to that. And then he basically kicked Tony Schiavone out and then hyped up The Elite and himself. And he also said that next week he would be making his in-ring debut, which we found out later was going to be against Frankie Kazarian. And then Bryan Danielson came out, and Kenny Omega asked The Elite to give the ring to both him and Bryan. And Danielson got in the ring and he took the microphone from Omega and asked the crowd if they wanted to see Bryan Danielson and Kenny Omega fight. And after some provoking from Danielson, Omega charged at him, but Danielson caught him in his label lock, because he can't use the names the Yes Lock or the No Lock anymore. And Omega tapped out, but then The Elite came in to help him, and they beat down Danielson, but then Christian Cage, Jurassic Express, and Frankie Kazarian came down to even the odds, and Danielson finished the segment off by hitting Brandon Cutler with a running knee and sent the Elite packing. And then we had our main event, which was Jon Moxley versus Minoru Suzuki, and I kind of felt like this match fell short of expectations. It was pretty brutal though. I mean, at one point Suzuki did get busted open, but eventually Moxley hit the paradigm shift, which, by the way, I have to say, I absolutely hate how he does this move now, because it's supposed to be like an elevated double underhook DDT, but the way he does it honestly just kind of makes it look like a double underhook suplex. Like, they don't even land on their head anymore, they just land on their back, and it makes the move look really bad and not effective or brutal at all. But either way, Moxley got the win tonight and celebrated among the fans to close out the show.